Welcome to the E2 Test Prep and Bravo Migration webinar. We're really delighted that you're able to join us today. My name's Georgie. I'm located here in Melbourne. I work in the E2 marketing team. So we are going to get the webinar content underway very soon. Just want to take a couple more seconds, allow everyone to join and get comfortable. We've got some incredible content for you today. And we really look forward to taking you through it. So before we get underway, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce you to our speakers today. So I'm delighted to be joined with Erica Carneiro from Bravo Migration. So Erica is the founder director of Bravo Migration, and she's also a registered migration agent. So Erica understands very well the life of the international students as she immigrated to Australia from Brazil back in 1996. She's helped over 10,000 people achieve their migration dreams. So a lot of wealth of experience there, Erica. It's great to have you here. And I'm also delighted to be joined with Mark Switzer. So Mark is our E2 expert teacher. He has a wealth of experience as well in the IELTS, PTE, English exams. Mark has helped hundreds of students pass their English tests. And he's also worked as a past IELTS examiner, so he knows exactly what examiners are looking for in the IELTS exams. So just a little bit about E2 Test Prep. So we are the #1 test prep provider for the high stakes English tests. We've helped over 1.6 million students confidently prepare for their test. So we offer a one-stop learning platform that gives students access to hundreds of practice questions, mock tests, teacher tutorials, assessments with feedback. All our teachers are native English speakers and they're very experienced educators. And our student support team are there for you 24/7. So if you have any queries about how to access the platform, how to get the most out of your package, our support team are there to help you and help you find what you need. So if you haven't already signed up for a free 30-day trial, we really recommend you to do that. It's a chance to really try out the platform, get the most out of it, see where maybe some areas you need to improve, really, know how you can confidently prepare for your test and where your kind of current standard is at. So if you haven't already started a free 30-day trial, head over to e2testprep.com to find out more about that. So we have a wealth of kind of knowledge across different social media platforms. So feel free to check us out on YouTube. If you search for E2 Test Prep, IELTS PTE channels are there. On Facebook, Instagram, we have our handle at E2 Language. And we also have a newsletter if you'd like to sign up. So today's webinar. So this is the content that we're going to be getting underway with very, very shortly. I really recommend you stay to the end. We're going to be giving out some goodies for you. So we've got the IELTS Ultimate Download Guide. This covers all the sections of the IELTS test, the marking criteria, gives you a really great introduction to what each of the sections of the test involves. And we also have an exclusive code for you today. So if you're keen to try out a paid package, you can use the code BRAVO15 to get 15% off your paid package. So that code is available for the next 72 hours. So feel free to, take advantage of using the code. Now, before I pass on to our first speaker, we are just quite interested to know where everyone is joining from, us from today. So if you wouldn't mind, if you can see the poll coming up, so which country are you currently located in? Please feel free to answer, if you can. We'd love to know where you're joining us from, and I'll share the answers in about 15 seconds, just give everyone a bit of a chance. Beautiful. Cool. Okay, we're getting lots of responses coming through. Thanks, everyone. That's great to see. Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to end that and I will share the results. Well, hopefully everyone can see that. Yep, beautiful. Great. And then just secondly, we're quite interested to know what visa categories people are interested in applying for. So just give me a moment. I'm going to bring up that poll. So yeah, if you've got 15 seconds, just give us a bit more info. If you're applying for the visa 198, visa 190, visa 485, visa 482, these are all, visas that Erica is going to take you through the recent updates from the government. Beautiful. So give last 5 seconds, give everyone a chance to let us know which visa you're hoping to go for. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. And I'm going to share those results.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have a lot for the visa 190 and then quite a lot for the visa 189, visa 491. So yeah, that's really useful to know. Beautiful. Thank you everyone for sharing. And beautiful. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome Erica and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here. People from everywhere around the world, not just in Australia, and looking at visas, in terms of, coming to Australia if you're not here or staying in Australia if you are already here. So lovely to be here again. And we were invited to speak about permanent visa options for Australia, but also from the perspective of the English tests required and the scores. I find that there's a lot of confusion out there in terms of what scores are needed for which visa. And no wonder there's confusion because we have several subclasses of visas. And when we were talking about the skilled migration program, then it gets very confusing. Every visa has a different score requirement. So we're happy to not only touch on the requirements for each of the most popular visas, but to clarify once and for all for you guys out there watching today, what are the scores required and how. So that would be great to be discussing this with you. A little bit about me. You already introduced me very well, Georgina, thank you. I migrated to Australia myself, as you can tell by my accent, and started working with international students as soon as I arrived. So started working with student visas, then moved on to register as a migration agent in 2005. And I've been working with other types of visas since then. So to work with visas in Australia, we are required by law to register with the Department of Home Affairs, and we get a code and we become registered migration agents. It's not easy to do that, not easy to maintain the registration, but we, been helping people for a while. And in 2008, I co-founded Bravo Migration, and we have been helping people since. And I started that slide with always consult a registered agent, especially if you're overseas, if you are not in Australia. There's a lot of unregistered advisors all over the world who don't have no accountability if they give you the wrong advice. So be careful and try to find the correct advice with an Australian registered agent. Thank you. So going straight into it, because I know that's what you guys came here for, we'll talk about first the broad programs that we have in Australia. So Australia has probably around 200 different types of visas, and they're all divided into smaller programs. So we have the family visa program, which we'll see people applying for visas here who are in a relationship with an Australian citizen or permanent resident, who have parents from overseas they want to bring over, and so on. There's no English language tests required for this program. It's pretty much just based on people's relationships, regardless if they can speak English or not. The student visa program, it's a self-explanatory, for people who want to come to Australia on a student visa and either study here for a period of time and return to their home countries or stay for longer. The department doesn't encourage the entry of students who already have a goal to stay permanently, but there are avenues within the migration program for a student to stay in Australia longer. Working holiday visa is just for certain countries where they get a year or two sometimes, where they come to study and travel. The business and investment program is for people who are already business owners or professional investors in their home country. It requires a lot of investment. And we have the humanitarian program for people who seek asylum in Australia. That also doesn't look into their English level. Now, what I'm sure you're all here for today are the visas within the skilled migration program. And in this program, every single visa application will require you to show a certain level of English. And there's different exams you can choose to take to show evidence of your English level. And each visa has a different requirement. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Thank you. Now, the skilled migration program itself, and I'm being very basic information for you guys, but it's important to understand, especially if you're not in Australia, you see a lot of crazy talk and confusing information. So the skilled migration program is divided into two types of visas: general skilled migration visas and employer-sponsored visas. Now, employer-sponsored visas, again, are self-explanatory. People first need to find an employer in Australia that is offering them a job and a visa. Now, general skilled migration does not require a job offer. And here we find those visas that are points tested. So I'm sure most of you heard about them. And as we did the poll earlier, the 189 and the 190 visas are general skilled migration visas. So we're going to go into that. But again, every single visa in this program and in both categories requires that you show results from an English test. Thanks, Georgina. Now, you don't need to show an English test if you are from a country where English is the official language. So there's a handful. If you're from Canada, UK, US, Ireland, New Zealand, then you don't need to sit for an exam. Now, if you were born somewhere else but have a passport for one of these countries, an English test is not required either. But the majority of you here today are students at E2 or are thinking about becoming students at E2. So I'm presuming that's not the case, that you guys all need to show an English test. So we'll depart from that premise. Before we go into the employer visas and the general skilled migration visas, I want to start with a very important temporary visa that we help a lot of people get in Australia, which is the graduate visa 485. It's not part of the skilled migration, the general skilled migration program, but it's not a student visa, but it's very important for many people. And we use this visa strategically when people are studying in Australia and then decide to stay for longer. This is a temporary visa, so it's not a permanent visa. Goes a little bit out of our topic, but it's very important. I cannot stress how important this visa is. So people who come to Australia to complete a higher education course, a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a doctorate, if that course has a duration of at least 2 years, they are then able to apply for a graduate visa, regardless of the field in which they're studying. So we know there's certain occupations that are in high demand in Australia. This visa under the post-study work rights stream doesn't really care about it. As long as you come to study at a higher education level, this visa is open for you after you graduate. Now, people studying at a VET level, so what we call a vocational education training level, doing a trade certificate, a diploma in business. They can also access the graduate visa 485, but only if they can nominate an occupation in high demand. And that occupation in high demand needs to be featured in a list called medium and long-term skills shortage list, the MLT SSL. Now, I have very good news for everyone. If you are in Australia already, the government has applied a concession for people who are completing their 2 years of vet studies between now and July next year. And people will be able to apply even if they don't have an occupation in demand. So people get 2 years or more, depending on where they studied and what they studied. So this is a great springboard for people to use this time to then apply for a better visa, a permanent visa, and stay here. This visa gives the holder full work rights. And if you have a good migration agent and they create a good strategy for you, you can use this visa and apply for something permanent much sooner after you are granted this visa. There's an age limit, and this is for people aged 50 maximum. So I have a client at the moment, she's 49, and she's gonna finish her course 1 month after her 50th birthday. So it's devastating because we can't get the visa for her, but for anyone who's under 50, it's a great option. So this visa, however, requires you to sit for an English test. And in the next slide, we'll see what English test score you need to apply for the graduate visa 485. Now, probably some of you know, or you don't, there's 5 tests that the Department of Home Affairs accepts for the purposes of visa applications. They are the IELTS General. You do not need to sit for IELTS Academic. For immigration purposes, there's other moments where you might have to sit for the academic test. The OET, the Occupational English Test, the TOEFL, PTE Academic, and Cambridge. But be careful, Cambridge is only advanced that can be accepted. So we know there's a first certificate in English with Cambridge. That's not acceptable. It needs to be the CAE, the Cambridge Advanced English Test. Now, with graduate visa 485, what the department's seeking is a minimum overall score of 6 on IELTS, but nothing under 5. So we know the IELTS exam has 4 components: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You must have an overall score of 6, and none of these components, your score can be under 5. So sometimes people do get an overall score of 6, but they have a 4.5 in one of the components, and that unfortunately is not enough. One question that we get a lot of times is, can I use multiple exams and combine those exams to show that I have the score required? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. The department will only look at your score in one sitting. So if you did very well today, but you got one score under 4.5, you take the test next week again, and then that component has been bumped up. We can't use those 2 exams to show you have the minimum level of English. It needs to be in one day, in one sitting. Now, if you're choosing to take the OET, the minimum score is B. The TOEFL, also accepted. There's an IBT TOEFL. Here, the overall score needs to be 65. But if you score less than 4 on listening or reading, then we have a problem. And you cannot score less than 14 on speaking and writing. So be careful with graduate visa 485. As you can see the trends, there's a minimum overall score, but there's also minimum in each components. PTE, minimum overall of 50 with nothing under 36. Cambridge, 169, nothing under 154. Now you must obtain your results before you lodge the visa, or the visa will be refused. Thank you. Now going straight into the permanent visa subclasses. So we normally use the graduate visa to get people to these visas later. We have an independent permanent skilled visa, subclass 189. We saw that the winner on the poll earlier was subclass 190, and that is a permanent visa as well, but it's a state territory nominated. So not only you need to meet all the Department of Immigration's requirements, but we need to find a state or territory that's seeking your occupation, otherwise you can't apply. And there's even a temporary skilled visa for regional areas. The subclass 491, it's a 5 years visa that then later leads on to a permanent visa 191. So all these three visas have requirements in common. The applicant must be under 45, and there's no exceptions or exemptions. Unfortunately, if you are aged over 45, you cannot apply for any of these visas. The minimum level of English accepted is what we call in legislation competent English. And I'm going to describe exactly what that means in the test results. And you must have an occupation in the relevant list for your visa. The 189 visa looks at the super high demand list, again, the MLT-SSL. So it's not a very large list. We're looking at health occupations, all the engineering occupations, teaching and trades, all the IT occupations as well. In terms of trades, we have commercial cookery, we have plumbing, carpentry, and so on. Subclass 190 and 491, they look at that list and another one. So we have more options of occupations for these visas. However, not only you need to see your occupation featured on the Department of Immigration's list, but we need to find a state or a territory that's also looking for your occupation. So we get a lot of inquiries from, let's say, marketing managers who say, I found that my occupation is on the STSOL, the short-term skills occupation list. And that's true, yes, but none of the states and territories might be looking for a marketing manager. And if there's no states or territories wanting to nominate marketing managers now, that makes your application for these visas impossible. Not only we have to nominate an occupation, it is necessary to obtain a skills assessment, which is like an official validation of your occupation. And here, many of the skills assessment authorities will also require an English test, and they ask for completely different scores than the department. That's why it gets confusing. Those visas, those three visas are points tested, so you need to score at least 65 on a points test, and that means that sometimes competent English is not going to be enough. In most cases, people need to score much higher than what we call competent English. We're going to look at that. And you can't just go and apply for this visa. So for all of you guys out there who answered the poll saying you're looking for subclass 189 or 190, I hope you understand we can't just go and apply for this visa. You need to be invited. You need to be pre-selected by the Australian government before you're able to apply for that visa. So there's a process there. You need to look for help from a migration agent. Thank you. In terms of English, as I said, everyone applying for this visa, even native speakers, need to show they have competent English. Competent English means you have a passport from an English-speaking country or this scores. So again, the same exams are accepted, but higher scores than we saw with the graduate visa are required. And we're not talking about overall scores anymore. We need 6 in each component of the IELTS General. We need 12 on TOEFL for listening, 13 on reading, 21 on writing, 18 on speaking. PTE academic must be 50 in each component, and Cambridge Advanced 169 in each component. Again, if you don't sit for the exam before applying for this visa, your visa will be refused. And I'm sorry, I skipped the OET. The minimum score is B. It's important. Thank you. Now, as I said before, we don't have a lot of places for these visas. Next financial year, the current one that just started in July, we saw an increase in numbers, but still, this is not enough for everyone in the world who wants to migrate to Australia. What does that mean in practice for you? Competent English, which is a score 6 on the IELTS, or B on the OET, or 50 on PTE, might not be enough for you to be invited, because the system, having so few invitations available, only invites those who have the highest points score. And one of the best ways to get higher points is by scoring higher on your English test. Thank you. So if you want to get, oh, that's looking a bit funny. If you want to get more points, I think it's the color on my slides, Georgina, not your fault, sorry. If you want to get more points on the points test, you have to start considering proficient English. If you want to get even more, 20 points, superior English. Now, I'm showing there that the person who was invited with their score, the lowest score within the invitations was 85. So you really need to think about getting the highest score possible in your English test at all times. Thank you. What is proficient English? So you can claim 10 points in your points test, because competent English doesn't give you any points. It's just the minimum. Proficient English will get you 10 points, but then you need to score 7 in each component of the IELTS. B, still with the OET, it's B all the way. 24 on the listening component for TOEFL, 24 for reading, 27 for writing, 23 for speaking. PTE academic, now we're talking about 65 in each component. And again, a minimum of 185 in each component of Cambridge Advanced. The next slides will show us what superior English is, and then things start getting complicated and harder. We're talking about an IELTS score of 8 in each component. TOEFL goes up to 28, 29, 30, and 26. PTE goes up to 79, and Cambridge Advanced 200. So I'm sure you need to also consider which one of these exams will be easier and best for you. And I'm sure Mark will talk about that later. But some people find the IELTS easier, some people find the PTE easier. What matters is we really need those scores if you're thinking about the 189 visa especially. Thank you. Moving on to employer-sponsored visas. So these are not points tested. You don't need to have a certain points score. You don't need to be invited by the government. What you need is a job offer in Australia from an Australian company. And it has to be a job offer in your field. So we get a lot of people saying, who contact us saying, I have a job offer in Australia as a cafe manager. And we say, great. And how long have you been a cafe manager for? Oh, no, I'm a doctor in my country. I'm just looking for any jobs in Australia. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. It needs to be a job where you have the same qualifications for that job and you have at least 2 years of full-time work experience for the temporary 482 visa. If we're talking about the regional 494 that leads into a permanent visa, or the permanent employer nomination visa 186, then you need even more work experience. With those two visas as well, for the sponsorship visa, you can be as old as you want. There's no age limits, but with subclass 186 and 494, we go back to that 45 years of age limit, unfortunately. And all these 3 visas require an English test as well, as we're going to see on the next slide. Starting with the 482 visa. And this is where it starts getting really complex. The 482 visa sponsorship, TSS, has 2 streams, a short-term stream and a medium and long-term stream. And this is determined by your occupation. So if your occupation is in super high demand in the medium and long-term list, your visa will be granted under that stream, and it's valid for 4 years. If your occupation is not in so much demand, it's going to be granted under the short-term stream because your occupation will be on that list. This visa is granted for 2 years, can be extended for another 2, and the English test scores lower than the medium and long term. So we're looking at an overall IELTS score of 5 with nothing under 4.5, an overall PTE score of 36 with nothing under 30. OET continues to be B. So as you can see, we need you to score B at least on the OET exam, the occupational English test. That's if you score A, great, but under B is not going to work for any visas. Now, the other exams change scores, so it's very confusing. TOEFL goes to 35 overall with nothing under 3, listening and reading, and 12, writing and speaking. And Cambridge 154 overall, nothing under 147. Now, the good thing with this visa is that we can lodge our application and then provide the results later. Under law, that's possible, but in our company, we don't do that because you may think you're going to do well in the exam and then you don't, and you can end up having your visa refused. So you should get your English test sorted as a matter of priority and the first thing when you're thinking about a visa application. Thank you. With the medium term, instead of having to score 5 overall on IELTS, it's 5 in each component, 36 in each component of the PTE, and 154 in each component of Cambridge. OET, again, B, and TOEFL, we're looking at 35 overall, but the same 4 and 14 scores with listening and reading, and then writing and speaking. Okay, next one, I think it's the permanent subclass 186 and the subclass 494 regional visa. So even though that is a temporary visa, the 494 leads onto a permanent visa. So these 2 require a higher score, competent English, which we saw is 6 in each component of the IELTS, or 50 in each component of the PTE, or OETB. And then TOEFL is accepted as well, as you can see there in Cambridge. Now, I think the next one is about skills assessment authorities. Indeed, thank you. So as I was saying before, all the general skilled migration visas, they require a skills assessment. So for example, if you're an engineer, I can't apply for your visa just saying, Department of Immigration, this is my client, John. He's an engineer. Please give him a visa. I need to certify you as an engineer in Australia. I need to get a registration for you as an engineer. And that process is called skills assessment. Now, if you're an IT professional, if you're a tradesperson, a carpenter, a chef, a cook, those occupations don't require, those skills assessment authorities don't require an English test. Those occupations are, you're going to have to provide an English test at your visa application stage, but not to the skills assessment authorities. Same thing with, did I mention IT? Yeah, I think I mentioned IT, and other occupations such as marketing and business and so on. Now, the skills assessment authorities that will require an exam are here. Engineers need to score 6 in each component of the IELTS. It's competent English again, and they accept other exams just like the Department of Immigration does. CPA for accountants, they are looking at IELTS academic, general is not accepted, and you need to score 7 in each component, or you can sit for the PTE and score 65 in each component. Now, the Australian Institute for Teachers, so if you're an early childhood teacher, a primary teacher, a secondary teacher, you can only do IELTS academic. They do not accept other exams. And you need to score 7 on listening and reading and 8 on speaking and writing, which then I can see Mark cringing. It's when it starts, things start to get complicated when we need 8. All the medical occupations, dentists, physiotherapists, psychologists, doctors, all the health occupations, they will have separate boards. So we have the Australian Dental Board, the Medical Board. They all accept the OET, the Occupational English Test, which is for health occupation, or IELTS academic, and it varies, but normally nothing under 7 on the IELTS academic in every component. Thank you. So we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but I think the most important point, and I see there's a lot of questions and we'll answer some of them. The most important thing is if you're outside or inside of Australia, you need to work out which visa you want to apply for. If you qualify for that visa, if you don't qualify, what will take for you to qualify, because it may be that is a long-term strategy. And once you determine, okay, there's a plan for me, I qualify now, in 1 year, in 5 years, you need to work out what your English language minimum requirement is. You really need to sit down and find out how much, because if you are one of these people who need 8, there's, lots of work you have to do, but I'm sure EQ Test Prep is here to help you. Now, how can we help you at Bravo? We can offer you, thanks, Georgina. Sorry. We can offer you that certainty if you qualify or not from the beginning, because a lot of people do some research online and think they qualify, and then they come to Australia on a student visa, change their lives, only to later find out they really shouldn't be thinking about that visa X. So we offer a visa action plan via Zoom. So it doesn't matter if you're in Australia, outside of Australia, with one of our agents, where we're going to check your chances. Now, if you are in Australia, we also have a free assessment by phone, but this is only for those of you who have a solid sponsorship offer. So you're already here, you're working for an Australian company and they want to sponsor you and your job's in your field, or if you're in a relationship with an Australian and you want to apply for a partner visa. In those cases, we're happy to assess you for free. Regardless, that's our email there. And yeah, I think that's it from me.
That was awesome, Erica. Thank you very much. You covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. And yeah, we'll definitely try and get to those questions.
Yes, I can see interesting questions.
People have got lots of questions, so that's great to see. So yeah, so yes, all of Bravo's contacts here. So
thank you.
Reach out for them. Now I'd love to pass over to Mark. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us. An interesting fact about Mark, Mark is originally from Canada and he now calls Melbourne home. So Mark, thank you again. Over to you.
Yeah, no problem. And Erica was right. She caught a little facial tick when she mentioned the 8 in IELTS. And I do want to say that, yeah, that it is doable, but it does require good choices in how you prepare for it. So I will talk a little bit about that. We'll start by just talking a little bit about essay writing or IELTS writing tips, particularly with essays. And the 3 main things that we often, there's so many parts of English that your exams will be assessed on, but we generally find that these 3 ideas are kind of the things we have to talk about most. The first is focusing on clear ideas. And this is not just something that we do or not something that you do in English, but it's also something that you must do in your first language and in the school that you're attending. in your country. You want to really be focused on making sure that you are clearly responding to the question with a clear idea, and that you are extending and supporting that idea. That really is the key point. It's not about, advanced vocabulary. It's not about advanced grammar. That will help. But at the end of the day, having clear ideas will better allow you to effectively use advanced grammar and vocabulary. That goes into the next point, using appropriate vocabulary. And that's because we often see a lot of students try to use, now our students don't do it. Occasionally someone will send us a sort of template, something that they've been taught. If you use these words, you'll get the higher score. And a lot of times students will get into trouble because they haven't answered the question, their ideas are unclear, or they might have a few advanced words, but the rest of the writing has a number of problems. So yes, using advanced vocabulary or memorized structures is not always going to help. Next, please. Yeah. For writing task 1, just the general approach that we have here. So, we have this with all of our students. They come to our live classes and they get this kind of instruction, and they get sample answers, and a lot of questions will get answered. Ensure that you have written more than 150 words. Now, they're not counting words anymore with IELTS, but generally that is the minimum you need to write to make sure you've carefully explored the ideas. Using paragraphs. In the IELTS writing test, one of the criteria to get a higher score, whether it's a 6, 7, or 8, is to have clear paragraphing. In the academic test, using both data and trends to describe what is happening. So this is actually kind of a beautiful thing about the IELTS test, and that's that if, even if you're making grammatical mistakes, if you're able to understand what the data means and you can articulate that clearly, even if not perfectly, you can get a good score. And that's what is really kind of special about this part of the test. But admittedly, for any of you looking for an 8 or higher, you will need both, clear explanations and relatively few errors to get there. There is the overview, meaning you're able to understand the big picture of the data you're looking at. And of course, a variety of sentence structures, simple, compound, complex sentences. So all throughout our courses, we give students some ideas on what type of grammar and sentence structures they can effectively use. However, the key point is to practice, review, get feedback. That's really the key point. Good language is good language. And the more you practice and get feedback and you are exposed to these forms of language, the better you will do. And also, again, just to reiterate the point about clear ideas, focusing on the main ideas and focusing on, what's important in the data is going to get you the better score, not, strategically planned grammar. Thank you. For the essay task, and that's writing task 2, it's surprising, but the number one thing that we often find we have to explain to the students is make sure you've understood the question. According to IELTS, IDP, the biggest problem students have is that they don't really understand or answer the question. So make sure that you've read the question, you understand what you need to write about, and you fully respond. And that's the second point. Make sure that you've clearly stated a position and then you've answered every part of the question. So there's usually 2 parts to the question, a sort of introductory prompt and then a specific question. Do you agree or disagree? Developing ideas with examples in effect. And this is really the biggest thing that we find students need a bit of help with, because there's a lot of bad teaching on how to write that we find on online all the time. Like, how do you effectively describe ideas? And we see a lot of, at the beginning, our students will use some very basic expressions like, for example, and usually by the end of their time with us, they have found better ways to extend their ideas. Having a clear position is also important. I remember what it's like to be a young university student and you're given two choices and you think, well, both are good. But typically those are very difficult to clearly articulate. So it's always important, pick one or the other. And finally, the marking criteria includes task achievement. Have you answered the question? Coherence and cohesion. Is your essay well organized and move from one point to the next? And then the last two are lexical resource, which is vocabulary and grammar, and its range and accuracy. Are you using less common language to express your ideas? And that's really a key point, especially with task 2, is that the better your vocabulary range is, the more you will be able to say with fewer words. And that's, again, for anyone looking for an 8, yes, E2 is absolutely going to help you organize your ideas. We're going to give you more ways to say things. But I would say if you are aiming for that 8, strong reading habits are going to help build your vocabulary and your grammar. And so whatever your plan is, I do always, one of the first things I ask a student is, how much do you read and listen to English on a daily basis? That's really a key point there. Yes, the writing criteria here, again, answer the question, address the prompt, and develop your ideas. And that means extending and making sure that the reader doesn't have to do any guesswork. And again, depending on the score, you will need to be better at this for the higher score. For a 6, they can be a bit more lenient in certain ways. And then again, we have other criteria, coherence and cohesion. How well do the ideas connect? Now, this can be done with connecting words and pronouns, but it's also, I think really the last bullet point here says everything. Ideas flow clearly from one to the next. That's really the key point with coherence and cohesion, is your ability to connect the ideas. Now, those two parts, if you really focus more on answering the question and organizing your ideas, that's something you can learn very quickly. And it's what we do focus on with E2, because if you learn how to develop and organize your ideas, it becomes so much easier to use the complex grammar and less common vocabulary. And every week we see students, you know, they come in and as soon as they start organizing their ideas more clearly, the grammar mistakes just reduce. It's really funny, but the better organized you are, the better your grammar will be. And also, I just remind students that, you know, if your idea is clear, your grammar mistakes don't affect your ideas. But if your idea is unclear, every small grammar mistake makes it harder to understand. And that just comes into the last 2 points here, which are lexical range, I believe. Not too many spelling errors or word choice issues, and accurate use of less common lexical items. Now, it's unpredictable. You don't know what topic you're going to get, so it is wise to read on a range of topics, and that's where the newspaper can be helpful, whether it's Al Jazeera English or BBC News. Those are 2 very good places you can start reading. And we often do make sure to tell students, use vocabulary you're comfortable with. If you make too many mistakes, like you try to use an advanced word and you haven't used it correctly, that's going to bring your score down to at least a 6. And finally, everyone's favorite, which is grammatical range and accuracy. And again, for an 8 in writing, you have to have that quite under control. Now, we do sometimes encounter students who maybe have attended university in Australia and they are still struggling with their IELTS test. Typically, grammar is not the problem. It's how they organize their ideas. You're required to write 250 words. And for some people, that's a lot, but for a lot of people, that's a very small amount of words. So they must learn to be organized and precise with what they say. So using a range of sentences, but the grammar has to help organize their idea. It's not a decoration. So at E2 in all our classes, and it's beautiful. We see it. We mark hundreds of papers, maybe thousands of IELTS essays every week, and we see this growth when they start with us and they're making these mistakes or they're using simple grammar, and by the end, their ideas are nicely organized, and typically their grammar has gotten better as well as their vocabulary. Just to finish up with a little bit of info on PTE, we've got the one part of the PTE advice I would give is the read aloud. And it's a simple task where you're simply reading a short text. Now, this is actually one where even native speakers get into trouble, because if they don't take the test seriously, they will read and speak very flat without any rhythm, and then they're unable to demonstrate the abilities they have. So speaking naturally and with rhythm, and I talk about sentence stress a lot. It really is the #1 problem people have when they're communicating or test taking in English. And I swear every 2 years, there's a story in the news about someone from Ireland or the USA who has taken PTE, not gotten the score they need. And most of the time, it's because they just don't take it seriously, and the computer gives them a low score because it's looking for specific things. Let's go on to the next one. Describing an image. They're going to give you typically an image or some graphical data, and it's fairly straightforward. You introduce what you see and you describe the trends that you see. And we cover all of these. Our students will come. We've got dozens of practice tasks, live classes, and teacher feedback that the students get. And that's really the key point when you're preparing is, yes, you should understand what's expected of you, but then it's also important to have a teacher listen to your speaking or look at your writing and give you feedback and say, you're doing better here, but you're doing this correctly, but if you want the higher score, you need to do this, and then this, and then this. And it's usually quite, a common trend that we'll see. And so the teachers know, they're very good at articulating or telling the students what they need to work on. Read, tell, lecture. In this part of the PTE test, you will simply listen to a academic lecture and then summarize it. And again, it's all about organization. It's all about saying, this is what the lecture was talking about. First, they mentioned this, and then they talked about this. Finally, they mentioned that. And again, it's fairly straightforward, but just a little bit of preparation will help you get the best possible score. And I think, yep, the final one that we'll talk about is summarizing a written text. You'll get a short text. You simply read it. I should say read that. You make notes on the key ideas and you write a short summary. So again, they're testing multiple skills at the same time. You're going to read and write. You're going to listen and speak. It's a really nice part of that test because it's true, like all of these skills exist together. Usually we're doing things where we're reading and speaking, or we're listening and writing, and the PTE test does a very good job of combining those skills. In the end, there is the essay. You will respond to a question prompt, similar, but not the same to the IELTS test. You take a side of an argument, and once again, you must always agree or disagree, or talk about advantages or disadvantages, and clearly support that position. And again, that's really a common error students will make, is that they will try to say, well, both are good options. And we always do remind students, yes, it is possible to do that, but most of the time the students are unable to clearly finish that job. So we always make sure that they choose one particular opinion and express it. Yeah, and like, this is a sample type of question. Do you think that preparing for an English exam is most effectively done online or face-to-face? And again, both of them can work, but for the purpose of the test, you will pick your response. It's either face-to-face or online, and then you will support that point of view with your experience or observations or readings. And again, you know, this can be your experience, this can be your friend's experience, this can be, you know, wherever the ideas come from, it doesn't matter. So they're grading your ability to organize and answer the question. There is no right or wrong. Both of them can be correct as long as you support your opinion with evidence or observations. Now, of course, there's that question, can you remember all that? And really, we try to remind our students that a language is a habit. You're on test day, you're not going to be remembering all of these details. On test day, you've practiced, you've gotten feedback, you've internalized that feedback, and now you are performing at that level. So it's kind of funny. It's not really that you don't want to remember it. You want it to be integrated into the way you speak and write. So building those strong reading and listening habits are usually the starting point, and then practicing and getting feedback is what's going to help you maximize your score on test day. Questions?
Beautiful.
So,
thanks so much, Mark. And yeah, just a reminder to everyone of the value that's in our packages. So, you know, there's access to loads of practice questions, live classes, mock tests, which students find extremely useful to know what they need to work on more before they're really ready to sit their test, and lots of assessments with expert detailed teacher feedback. So, and yeah, just a reminder on that code Bravo15 if you'd like to take advantage of a 15% discount. And now I think we've just got a little bit of time for some questions. But before I do that, yeah, just like to thank Mark and Erica. Thank you very much for giving up your time to take us through these wonderful tips and extremely helpful visa information. So perhaps I'll pass over to you, Erica. Maybe you've picked some questions that you'd like to go through.
Yes.
And then, of course, here are all Bravo Migration's contact details. If your question hasn't been answered, I think all these, this email address probably is the best one to reach out to get your questions answered.
Thank you. So I was listening to Mark and selecting some questions that we can answer. I don't think we're able to answer specific personal questions in terms of what are my chances with this profile and etc. So I chose those where we are able to cover a concept and that many people may have the same, concern. I would like to start with not a question, but someone here left a testimonial. Amitesh from Fiji. I would like to thank E2 for my IELTS preparation. I got 8 overall. Thanks, Mark, Jay, and team.
Oh,
this is
so lovely.
awesome. So 8 is indeed not impossible, and we see it happening, but good teamwork there, I imagine, because as you were saying, it's lots of work. So lovely to see this. Someone's asking, do I need IELTS academic or general for a 189 visa? I want to be sure because I'm about to book my exam. So in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that the Department of Immigration will never require an academic IELTS test. General is always fine. However, if you do take the academic test and someone had asked, can I use my academic results? If that was the case, you can still use it. The department will accept academic IELTS results, but you're not required to undertake that in particular. You can do general. Now, I lost names of who asked what, but for the person who is applying for their 189, I hope you understood you can't just apply for a 189. You need to be selected first. You need to submit an expression of interest. So if you are going through this process alone, please consult a registered migration agent because there's way more involved. Someone else also asked, I have a positive, and this might be more a question for Mark than me. I have received a positive outcome from my engineers Australia. I have 2.5 years of work experience. I set my PTE for 2 times, and all the time I keep getting 50. What should I do now? So,
yeah, I mean, it would depend. Obviously, there's a number of things that can go into that. I mean, the typical response I would be is get feedback. Have someone look at your writing, have someone listen to your speaking and give you feedback and see where you're going wrong. There's 2 things that could be happening. One is it could be your English level. And how you're using the language, and in which case the teacher can say, all right, well, you need to do this with your pronunciation, you need to do this with your grammar, and the other thing might just be more test awareness. Sometimes the students don't really know what exactly they need to do on the test, and again, I think that's when you have the college educated native speakers of English from the UK getting into trouble is when they don't know what they're supposed to do in the test. They don't do any preparation, and then they're not really doing what they're required to do.
Awesome. So I can see more questions coming in with personal circumstances. As I said, we won't be able to assess everyone's case. For that, we offer the visa assessment with Bravo. I'm trying to answer more general questions. I had some saying, I'm an engineer, I'm a plumber, do I qualify for this visa, for that visa? It gets a bit complicated. But I think with the points tested visas, which was the core of the questions I could see, we need to know, and someone asked here, what is the cutoff score? My score is 80, I'm a civil engineer. For everyone, the cutoff score at the moment is 85, regardless of your occupation. So you may be in an occupation where it's even higher, but no one with less than 85 points on the points test has been invited in the last round. And the last round of invitations was in April. So the only thing under your control that you can change in the points test is your English test score. You cannot change your age or how many years of work experience you have or what qualifications you have, but you can improve your English test results. That's the only thing under your control. Some good questions here in terms of updates. When will the new occupation list be published? There's not necessarily a new list coming up. The government is open to review the lists every year, but they haven't reviewed it in a while. And I think with a new government this year, the government has other fish to fry, as we say. So I don't think they're even going to look at that. Someone else is also asking what states are open for the 491 and the 190 visa. Very good question. At the moment, no states are open because we just had a change in government and the states and territories have not been allocated their quotas. Therefore, they're not nominating anyone yet. So I would say probably August, we'll see them coming back into life. I also had some questions here to do with age, which I think is an interesting and important topic. I saw many people asking about that. So for the general skilled migration program, the 3 points tested visas, if you're over 45, you cannot apply. Someone said, does it mean that if you are over 45, there are no visas that allow them to work in Australia? That's a separate matter. You can come on a sponsorship work visa that has no age limitations. You can come on a student visa, but those 3 points tested visas that allow you to stay here in Australia permanently, you can't apply. Now, the permanent employer visa, so you might be able to get a temporary sponsorship visa, but then the permanent employer visa also has a cutoff date of 45. Unless there is one exception, which is for doctors working in regional areas and for New Zealand citizens and for people who are earning above what is called the high income salary. At the moment is like $160,000 a year. So it's not that easy to get that exemption, unfortunately. So if you are over 45, you can get a student visa. If you're under 50, you can get a 485. You can get a sponsorship visa, but you won't be able, pretty much only in very limited cases, you can get a permanent visa. Also talking about the employer visa, some people are asking, how can you get an employer visa if you are outside of Australia? Someone said, I'm a nurse in the UK. Which pathway is better to get a nursing job in Australia? So that's also a very good question. And it's a general question that I'm happy to answer. Anyone can apply for a job in Australia. If you are in Fiji, if you are in the UK, if you are here in Australia. Now, is it common that an Australian company will hire someone who's not even here and who has never been face-to-face with that company? It used to be very rare, but with time, I have seen that more and more in certain industries that can happen. IT companies, healthcare, we're desperate for nurses, for example. So I don't think it's impossible for someone from overseas to secure a job while still outside of Australia. But you can only come to Australia and work here if they also give you a sponsorship visa. Now, the most common, and especially after the pandemic, Zoom meetings and interviews became more common. If you are here in Australia, that's the most common way of securing a job. You come with a temporary visa, you come to study, for example, you come on a working holiday visa if you're from a country that has that. Then you start working part-time or casually, and that company ends up sponsoring you. So that's the most common way. However, it's not impossible, and it's becoming more usual to see people getting jobs from overseas, and we work on their visas even before they have arrived. Now, to finalize and talk about work, someone asked if I can assist them with accommodation for an aged carer. We only work with visa applications. We do not offer job placements. We don't offer accommodation placement. We offer 2 services. We assess if you qualify for a visa. We tell you what to do. And if you qualify, we can work on that application for you. But other than that, we can't help. So I think that's it. That's the questions I selected. And I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks so much, Erica. We did very well to answer all those different questions. So yeah, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Erica. Don't hesitate to stay in touch with us on all these different channels. We hope you found it useful. I think we've covered a lot of different topics, so no doubt that might have spurred lots of different questions in you. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask those questions.
Sure. One thing just from our side, under migration law, we're not able to answer questions by email. So if you have questions, we pretty much will get back to you and offer a meeting, a consultation, a visa assessment with us. But we're there to help.
Absolutely. Beautiful. That sounds great. Thanks for that detail, Erica.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, Erica. Thanks so much for joining, Mark. Really appreciate you guys giving up your time and providing all this very useful content. So thanks to our viewers. Thanks everyone for joining us. We hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you for the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.